Before we dive into our story, if you enjoy intriguing and captivating stories like this, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give this video a thumbs up. Your support truly helps us continue creating content like this. Now, if you're ready, let's get started. Sometimes you make a huge mistake without realizing who you're talking to. That morning, everyone at the airport was going about their routine until someone treated the wrong person the wrong way. And when the truth came out, everyone was in shock. The young man walked towards the business class counter. The passengers ahead of him were swiftly checked in. However, when it was his turn, the female attendant eyed him from head to toe and raised an eyebrow. "The economy class check-in line is on the other side, sir," she said in a slightly condescending tone. The man smiled slightly. "I'm in the right line," he replied, handing over his ticket. The woman rolled her eyes and took the ticket. As she glanced at the screen, she hesitated for a moment, but her expression quickly returned to normal. "Business class?" she muttered mockingly. Then, shaking her head slightly, she added, "What a stroke of luck! First time flying business class." The man smiled again. "You could say that." Reluctantly, the woman confirmed his ticket and spoke in a formal yet cold tone. "Place your belongings properly and be at the gate on time." The man thanked her and walked away. However, as he did, the woman whispered something to her colleague with a faint smirk. He noticed, but chose not to care. After completing the check-in process, the young man made his way toward the VIP lounge. He walked carefully, trying not to attract attention. However, what was about to happen would soon become an unforgettable event for many at the airport. As he reached the lounge entrance, a security officer standing by the turnstile swiftly stepped in front of him. "Excuse me, sir, this area is exclusively for business and first-class passengers." The man raised his eyebrows slightly. "I know. I am a business class passenger," he replied calmly, handing over his ticket. The officer glanced at the ticket, but the doubtful expression on his face did not fade. He narrowed his eyes slightly, as if he suspected the man had made a mistake. "May I see your special membership card?" "I don't have a membership, but I do have a business class ticket. That should be enough." The officer let out a small sigh and shook his head. "I'm sorry, sir, but this lounge is reserved only for select members. Not all business class passengers have access," he said, his tone flat and cold. The young man hesitated for a moment. He knew that wasn't the rule. Access to the VIP lounge required either a business or first-class ticket, nothing more. But it seemed the staff here were making judgments based on appearances. Just as he was about to protest, a laugh echoed behind him. "I think you're in the wrong place, buddy. The VIP lounge isn't for ordinary passengers." The young man turned around and locked eyes with a businessman in an expensive suit, standing confidently with a few companions by his side. The businessman smirked, looking down at him. "The economy lounge is that way," he said with a wink. Laughter erupted from his friends behind him. To them, this was nothing more than a small but amusing moment. The young man smiled slightly, but said nothing. It wasn't time yet. Just then, someone else approaching the VIP lounge noticed the situation, the only person there who recognized the young man. The airline's operations director. With quick strides, the director walked toward the entrance. He first shot a sharp glance at the security officer, then at the businessman. Without hesitation, he extended his hand to the young man with the utmost respect. "Sir, it is an honor to see you here. I hope everything is to your satisfaction. Allow me to personally escort you." And at that moment, the entire room fell into dead silence. The businessman and his friends stood frozen, their eyes wide with shock. The security officer instantly panicked. "Sir, Uh, of course you may enter, he stammered, hastily opening the door. The young man nodded in thanks and stepped into the VIP lounge. But this wasn't the end, not yet. As he walked in, he noticed the utter disbelief on the businessman's face. The same man who had looked down on him moments ago was now desperate to know who he really was. "Who is this guy?" the businessman whispered to his companions. But none of them had an answer, and just like that, the mystery had only begun. After entering the VIP lounge, he settled into a quiet corner. With a cup of coffee in hand, he casually checked his phone while surveying the room. Just a few tables away sat the businessman and his friends, the same ones who had mocked him earlier. But this time they were silent. Now, instead of laughing, they stole glances at him, lowering their voices whenever they spoke. From the businessman's expression, it was clear he was still burning with curiosity. "Who is this guy?" one of his friends whispered. "I don't know, but did you see how the operations director treated him? He was overly respectful. Maybe he's someone important from the company?" The businessman took a deep breath and leaned back in his chair, frustration evident on his face. Just moments ago, he had looked down on him, mocked him, but now he had no idea who he was, and that uncertainty was eating him alive. Meanwhile, the young man simply sipped his coffee in silence. As time passed, the boarding announcements began. Priority passengers started making their way to the gate. The young man finished his last sip and stood up. Yet, despite having priority boarding, he chose to board last, because some lessons are best delivered at just the right moment. Midway through the flight, the cabin crew began meal service. As a young flight attendant approached the businessman's row, she suddenly stumbled slightly, and in that brief moment, a glass of juice spilled directly onto him. The entire cabin fell silent. The bright orange juice soaked into the businessman's expensive suit, quickly spreading across his chest. His eyes widened in pure rage. "What do you think you're doing?" he bellowed at the flight attendant. The young woman panicked, frantically trying to apologize. "I'm so sorry, sir. I swear it was an accident. Let me get you some napkins and a fresh change of clothes." But the businessman was furious. "This suit is worth thousands of dollars. Do you have any idea what you've done? Get me the person in charge, right now." And in that moment, time on the plane seemed to freeze, because the person the flight attendant had called was the very man who had seemed like just another passenger. The cabin crew approached him with respectful composure. "Sir, I believe someone would like to speak with you." The businessman's eyes widened in shock. You're the CEO of this airline?" The young man smiled slightly. "Yes, I am." A sharp breath was taken. The businessman's mind raced. The very man he had mocked, dismissed, and looked down upon, the one he had assumed didn't belong in business class, in the lounge, or even on this flight, was in fact the highest authority in the entire airline. His friends sat frozen. No one uttered a single word. The young CEO leaned back in his seat, calm yet unwavering. His gaze remained locked on the businessman. "First, you yelled at a flight attendant. Then you demanded to speak to someone in charge," he said, his voice composed, yet carrying an undeniable weight of authority. "Well, here I am. Do you have anything to say now?" The businessman swallowed hard. His fingers twitched as he nervously wiped them on his pants, avoiding eye contact. I suppose I overreacted. I apologize," he muttered, his voice devoid of its previous arrogance. The young man nodded. "Everyone makes mistakes," he said calmly, "but a true apology comes with a change in behavior." The businessman parted his lips as if to respond, but then hesitated. He had nothing to say. Around them, passengers whispered. Many had witnessed the businessman's outburst at the flight attendant. And now, watching him squirm with embarrassment in front of the very man he had disrespected, it was like something out of a movie. The young CEO turned to the flight attendant and spoke kindly. "Spilling juice can happen to anyone, right? There's nothing to apologize for. Our staff deserves understanding, not scolding." The flight attendant lowered her head slightly, a small smile forming on her lips. "Thank you, sir," she said softly. But the lesson wasn't over just yet. The young man turned back to the businessman and continued. "A replacement suit will be sent to you," he said calmly. "But in return, I ask that you treat our cabin crew and other staff with more kindness from now on." The businessman nodded, but his eyes remained fixed on the floor. He no longer had the courage to say anything more. "Of course," he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. The young man gave a slight nod. "Thank you for your understanding," he said, ending the conversation then and there. The businessman fell into silence. He sat back down with a slight tremor in his movements, avoiding eye contact with anyone. But everything had changed for him, because after this incident, he would think twice about how he treated the people around him, especially those who worked in service. As the plane began its descent, the businessman was still seated, his hands clasped together. He had not spoken a single word throughout the entire journey. The announcement was made, and passengers started exiting one by one. However, everyone's eyes were still on the young man. Who was he? Why did so many people not know him, yet the flight crew approached him with such great respect? The man chose to be among the last to disembark, because some lessons needed to be spread over time. As he walked toward the terminal gate, he noticed that the businessman who had mocked him in the VIP lounge was watching him from a distance. Now, on his face, there was only great regret. Just as he was about to step through the door, the businessman caught up with him in quick strides. "Sir, 1 second." The man stopped, slightly turning his head to the side. The businessman averted his eyes as he spoke. "For what happened today, I am truly sorry. I acted arrogantly and disrespectfully. I was unfair to your crew by shouting at them. Please accept my apology." The man listened in silence. Then he took a deep breath and nodded. "I accept your apology," he said calmly. But then he added, "However, remember, a true apology is not just words, but is shown through a change in behavior. I hope that from now on, you will show respect not just to those who appear strong and wealthy, but to everyone." The businessman, avoiding eye contact, nodded. The man smiled slightly and slowly continued walking. The young man walked towards the exit of the terminal. He had arrived in another city. The check-in agent who had looked down on him and the security officer who had blocked his way in the VIP lounge were no longer here. However, his experience at the airport had already spread quickly. Just as he was about to step outside, a man in a suit approached him with quick strides. It was the airline's human resources director. "Sir, welcome," he said, bowing his head slightly. "First of all, we have heard about the incidents you experienced at the airport, and we are deeply sorry. It is completely unacceptable for you to have been treated with any form of disrespect. If you wish, we can terminate the employment of the staff involved." The young man paused for a moment. He had not expected this. He took a deep breath, then smiled slightly. "No, that won't be necessary," he said calmly. "I do not want anyone to lose their job because they treated me unfairly. But if you ever see them making the same mistake towards an ordinary passenger, then do what needs to be done." The HR director nodded slightly at these words. Of course, sir. Thank you for your understanding and your approach. The young man smiled and gave a small nod as a farewell. He was not someone who used his power for revenge, but he did want justice to be upheld. He stepped through the terminal's glass doors and walked towards the car waiting for him. There was no anger within him, only the realization of how quickly people make judgments. As he opened the car door and got inside, one thought crossed his mind. Power should not be used to crush people, but to do what is right. And in that moment, the young man was sure of one thing, because today he had not just taken a business trip. He had given people a lesson they would never forget. As the car slowly drove away, the airport faded into the distance. But what had happened here would never be forgotten. So what do you think? Did the young CEO make the right decision? Was it fair not to fire the employees who looked down on him? Or would terminating their employment have been a better lesson? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your opinions.